What's up, man? Hello? 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 Sorry, I was. It was the sound was on my laptop instead of the audio, sound card. But yeah, thanks for letting me know. I didn't know. That's because I wasn't wearing my headphones. That is why. I was streaming COD lately. That's why I'm streaming late with Tekken. Yeah, kind of like him, to be honest.
Make it nice to watch on your laptop.
Hey,
Are you making a video?
oh, no. Oh, Mickey. Against my Leroy? Did you mean your Paul against my Leroy? Yeah, I haven't. I haven't yet. Yep, nope.
Round one. Fight. Perfect.
You wanna try?
Fight.
Yeah. How about after these guys? You can send me an invite after that.
KO. Round three. Fight.
Yep, sure. I'll start Tekken. Yeah, sure.
KO. Round four. Fight. You win. Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight. You're done.
No!
Round 2. Fight. Go, sugar. KO. Round 3.
Go, sugar!
Fight. This is gonna hurt.
Rinchin!
Go, sugar.
Just let me know when once you're ready. Yeah, I'll just finish this one. Alright.
You lose.
There we go. So how strong is your pole right now? Is your pole strong enough against my Leroy?
Welcome to the King of Iron Fist, Leroy Smith. Get ready for the next battle.
Leroy Jenkins.
Oh my god. My, look at Mickey. My, look at Mickey. My, look at Mickey.
You're ruining Mickey.
Mommy, look at Mickey. Mommy, look at Mickey. Are you looking?
Oh, come on.
Fight.
Wait, what? One, two,
Oh, what?
one. It's blue, Daddy.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Oh, what the heck?
Now, I hate being magnified.
Wing Chun.
You're done. KO. Round 4.
Kaname Tosen.
Fight.
Hey, hey. Prince.
Don't run away, I kill you. Ha ha ha.
Get ready for the next battle.
Yeah, that's pretty much everyone is saying against Leroy. It's probably gonna get a nerf, like probably next month. Yeah, it is.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight.
No. Ooh.
Go, sugar. KO. Round 3. Fight.
Ah, what happened?
Round 4. Fight. KO. You lose.
No. Can you give me one chocolate, please?
Oh my god, you can carry.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. I'm stuck with the connecting.
Uh-oh, sticky. Uh-oh, sticky. Uh-oh, sticky. Uh-oh, sticky.
I think you got disconnected. One more. Go. Ah, two more.
Oh my
Gaya tagay ako.
god! Already got so much!
Duha.
Hey, come on!
What, you got disconnected?
Why is it there?
Welcome to the King of Leroy Smith.
Sure.
Get ready for the next battle.
Rain. Quiet.
I think everyone should do that. And you. Why? Might be. Okay. Oh well, it's just scary. Tensions are hot. Everyone's ready to kill each other. And you are. No!
It's you. Yeah. Nice. Nice.
I didn't have time. I couldn't even process what's going on.
Look. Up. I'm gonna fight longer.
Oh,
I got her.
nice.
Up. Me versus this guy. Me versus this guy.
Go.
He's trying to throw him. He's trying to throw him. Got it. I got him. I know. If I actually win this, that'd be so cool.
Uno que este gallo scares me.
No, of course, no.
Take out the dragon. Round one. Fight.
Please stop playing that game! Race! Go and race! Do it! Are you making a video? Are you making a video?
Round two. Fight. KO. Round three. Fight.
I was waiting for the Hadouken.
Round four. Fight. Perfect. Final round. Fight.
He can. He can. He can parry all those stuff. As long as it's mid or high, he can parry it.
Welcome to the King of Iron Fist, Leroy Smith.
Prince.
Uh-oh, stinky.
Somebody's gonna get a nerve. Right? Somebody's gonna get a nerve. I think the only thing that he can't parry with those is the low attack.
Get ready for the next battle.
Low or high, I guess. I'm not sure with high.
Wait, what? Oh, come on!
Yeah. I think he's gonna get a nerf pretty soon.
Stinky. Oh, hi! Welcome to the
Round one.
stupid
Fight. KO. Round two. Fight. KO. Round three. Fight.
Oh, what?
KO. Round
1-inch punch.
fight.
One inch punch. He's got an arsenal for like close combat, but I think he's got his weaknesses is when his range. He doesn't have much of the range. But he needs to be close because that was a 1-inch punch. Like everything in him, it's like he needs to be closer. Because his cane is not really that helpful with the range, because it doesn't hit your opponent when
To the king of Iron Fist.
your opponent is like way like 3 steps away from you. His cane doesn't do much. So if you want to play Leroy, you need to be as close as you can.
Go this way.
Get ready for the next battle.
What happened to your who's this name? Whose character is this? Why you became a fighter? Yeah, that's gotta be the Leroy's problem, because he's got the long range attacks. I'm not sure Leroy can parry the sword. Yeah, can't parry those. Oh, he can parry a sword! Nope. He can't parry those.
Round 2. Fight.
What happened?
KO. Round 3. Fight.
He can't parry those swords.
Go, sugar. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight.
What?
KO. You win. Welcome to the King of Iron Fist.
Special weapon denied. Your special weapon got denied. But he can't parry all the lows, you know. So that's gonna be something you have to think about.
Oh, yes! Yes! Look, that's actually who it was! The murderer. Oh, really? Wow. Yes. They're all voting for... They just vote for whoever's next to them.
That makes sense. 'Cause why would you?
Although the thing is, his parry doesn't do much if you can predict it, because unlike Jin can pretty much punish the enemies once he successfully parried the attacks.
Oh, okay, women.
That's what you get for killing my friend! Oh, I'm the only one in this whole row. Oh, not me. No! Oh, the gun didn't go off. Oh, yeah. It's more
But I don't think the pro will use Leroy in a tournament base, because
Fight.
his moves are way so gumble. See? Yeah, he can't parry those. He can't parry those as well.
KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight.
What I was trying to do is
You're done.
I wanted to time the parry and then the 1-inch punch. If I can do that, then probably this is punishable.
Fight.
Just that I can't do the timing. Can you do the sword? The long range. No, the long range, the throw. If no. Can you throw me your sword if I can parry it? I was saying if you can throw me your sword so that
Welcome
I can
to the
parry
King
it.
of Iron Fist, Leroy Smith.
Yeah. That was what I was waiting for.
Agnes from India.
Although I'm not sure if he's going to be able to parry it, because that's technically a range attack already or something.
Get ready for the next battle.
What's next?
ER.
Legend of the Dragon.
Round one. Fight.
Oh, what? Wait, hang on. Oh! I can parry it. Hang on, go back. I can parry it. Wait. Oh crap! It's so hard to time. I can parry it. No. Go away. What? Hang on. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, go. I can parry it. I can parry it. So he can basically parry Akuma's
Time up. Round two.
Akuma's Hadouken as well, probably.
Go, sugar.
Where's Sugar going? Oh crap.
This is gonna hurt. KO. Round three. Fight.
He still can parry all those rage. Yeah, he can. He did. He just parry it. He just parried it. No! Why?
Round four. Fight.
Nope. Nope. I guess he can't. Oh, he can. He can. Oh. See? He can parry it.
How do you spell Christmas again?
He can pretty much parry everything in the mid.
Final round. Fight. Go, sugar. This is gonna hurt. You win.
Not right now.
Come on.
All right. Thanks for the match. Have a good night, bro. But hey, at least nobody would call your character bullshit car anymore because Lear is already here. Like nobody will call Negan and your character who's I forget the name. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're gonna get nerf. Okay.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
The swag. Leroy Jenkins.
Round one.
There's a new kid in town.
Fight.
I'm so sorry, man. I bet he's gonna rage quit after this one.
Round four. Fight.
Here comes a rage quit.
KO.
Oh, he didn't. He's got 10 wins. I was wrong. I thought he's gonna rage quit after that. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. He took it. I bet you're gonna practice him now, right?
New challenger.
But you said that you're not gonna be able to sleep after that fight.
Go, sugar. New challenger. Get ready for the next
You're doomed. You're doomed.
My. Tell me the gimmick. What?
You're gonna have to put aside your Paul and your main character.
It's
Damn it! I almost forget his name.
weird. It's weird. It's weird. Oh!
What's his name again?
Kill him. Kill him.
I always think of Cloud.
It's not dying. It's not dying.
Leviathan.
round one. Fight. Perfect. Round two. Fight. KO. Round three. Fight.
I made a mistake.
KO. You win.
The new god in Tekken. It's Kanami Tosen.
New challenger.
What?
New challenger.
I
Go,
don't have
sugar.
arrows anymore. Why did I have?
New challenger.
Oh, there's some arrows in the car. Yes.
Ah.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight. KO. Round two. Fight.
Yeah, he can't parry the highs.
KO. Round three. Fight.
Oh my god, there's a zombie!
This is gonna hurt.
Mommy, I have a special attack. I
You're done.
can shoot.
That was so small.
Go, sugar.
Sugar didn't manage to get it in time.
Fight. Perfect. Final round. KO. You win. Come on, sugar.
Nadle. Barbatos.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Prince.
I got it.
Round one. Fight.
Raging Demon. He can't parry those.
Perfect. Round 2. Fight. Perfect. Round 3. Fight.
Oh! Shakru.
This is gonna hurt.
Missutsu.
Fight. Go Shadow.
Shakru.
KO. Final round.
Shakru.
Fight. KO. You win.
Oh man, he doesn't want the rematch. Why?
New challenger.
Sakura.
Get ready for the next battle.
What are you doing, Prince? Prince. Prince, what are you doing?
Round 1. Fight. Perfect. Round 2. Fight. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Carlito QH. I wonder if he can pair those chainsaws.
Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. Perfect. Round 3. Fight. KO. You win.
Going out with nothing to show for it. Ow!
Get ready for the next battle.
Not too much.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. You win.
You're going out with nothing to show for it.
Get ready for the next battle.
Alright, one more time for this guy.
Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight. Go, sugar. KO.
実は私強かったんです。
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
It keeps going, it keeps going. Oh my gosh. Ow.
That was so expensive. Let's just buy the Santa.
Ow. Ah. Ow. Oh jeez, oh jeez, oh jeez.
I don't know.
Ow. Oh.
I don't know
It keeps going. Ow.
what she does to make you cry.
Naganda kayo kasi nga
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round
Leroy
3.
Jenkins.
Fight. Fight. This is gonna hurt. You're done. Go, sugar. Go, sugar. KO. You win. You're going out with nothing to show for it. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. This is gonna hurt. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight. Go, sugar. KO. You lose. Come on, sugar. New challenger. ready for the next battle.
Right?
What are you doing? Being clingy? You're just being clingy to Mickey.
No, hugging.
Huh?
You're hugging.
That's why you're hugging and you're being clingy.
I'm not sure if this is the same guy, but how could you say you love me? You were so bad.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. Go, sugar. KO.
Can't really time that much.
Round 3. Fight. KO.
I don't think I can cancel that. That would be so OP if we can cancel that move. The hell sweep. Somebody save me. You wanted waiting for just a...
Time to take out the trash. Round 1. Fight.
Oh, what the heck?
KO.
That was supposed to be sugar.
Fight.
Really don't know how to use that orbital.
This is gonna hurt. You're done.
Really? That's all?
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight.
What the heck?
This is gonna hurt. KO. You lose. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
What the heck?
KO. Round 2.
I really don't know how to use that orbital.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. You lose. You're going out with nothing. Get ready for the next battle.
Do you hear that time to listen to me? Why?
Round 1.
I am
Fight.
one of those.
KO. Round 2.
Dramatic
Fight. KO.
There's no way to cancel.
Round 3. Fight.
What happened?
Perfect.
You don't know what happened.
You lose.
You're going out with nothing to show for.
Get ready for the next battle.
I am one of those dramatic fools. Sometimes I leave myself the creeps.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3.
Unfortunately, it's not guaranteed.
Fight. KO. You lose.
You're going out with nothing to show for it.
Get ready for the next battle.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to join the Black Parade.
Time.
Round 1. Fight.
Why are they so successful with that orbital?
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Really don't know how to use that orbital. Why?
This is gonna hurt.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight.
Happen. Nope.
KO. Final round. Fight. Perfect. You win.
You're going out with nothing to show for it.
Get ready for the next battle.
Sometimes I make myself black wish. Sometimes I just really night. I just really night. I am all yours, and I am strong.
Round 1. Fight.
What?
KO. Round 2. Fight. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. You win.
You're going out with nothing to show.
Get ready for the next battle.
Sometimes I
Round 1. Fight.
Oh, that's nice.
Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. Perfect. You win. Composure. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Oh. Oh.
KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. You win.
You're going out with nothing to show for it.
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. sugar.
Alright,
You
that's all for now.
You're
I need to
going out
sleep.
with nothing to show for it.
And it's already 12. Winchon title. Let's see what's the new costume. There is nothing. No, nothing. No. That's pretty much it. No unlock. So from this one. Nope. Right here. Nope. 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 No. No. Basically, there is nothing new. Nope. Nothing. Alright, that's it. Good night for now. See you again tomorrow. Alright, bye.